Leader Tim Lannon from Anderson, House Democratic Leader Phil Giaquinta from Fort Wayne. They will make statements and then we'll take your questions. Gentlemen.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Senator Lannon.
Yes, thank you.
We just wanted to give a progress report here on as we approach halfway through the session. Senator Lannon, I was thinking the other day, reflecting on Governor Holcomb's State of the State address and some of the issues that he outlined in his speech. And I was thinking about that over the weekend because as I was listening to his speech that evening, I thought there are some things here that he mentioned that we can embrace, that we can work with him on,
Yes.
and I think I like some of the issues that he talked about. In fact, frankly, it was in stark contrast to the lack of ambition displayed in the House Republican agenda. However, now that we're at the halfway point of the 2019 session, we've seen very limited progress on some of these important issues.
Yeah.
Frankly, House Republicans set a low bar for accomplishing anything this session, and we're not even reaching it. We continue, I believe, House Republicans anyway, continue to try to solve these problems by just sort of nibbling around the edges and coming up with more commissions and study committees and pilot programs. And we can't afford to wait. We have to act now. We need solutions now. With that, let me just, if I can, talk about some of the things that House Democrats put forward this session to try and solve these problems that are facing our state. We heard a lot about teacher pay. House Democrats put forward a number of proposals to increase teacher pay for our hardworking teachers, including an amendment by Representative Porter last week to the budget that would increase pay 5% over the biennium. It was rejected by House Republicans.
I'm shocked.
I saw there were at least maybe 5 or 6 bias crime bills that were filed in the House.
Yes.
Not one received a hearing, so no movement whatsoever on bias crime bill in the House. Election reform, House Democrats were rejected on multiple attempts to increase voter participation in the state. There was no committee hearing on a redistricting reform bill. We talked a lot about expanding pre-K statewide. We've had a pilot program now for a number of years, and Representative Carrie Hamilton had an amendment to the budget that would expand the program statewide. Unfortunately, it was also rejected by House Republicans. We want to invest in working Hoosiers. Representative Cherish Pryor had a proposal that would increase the earned income tax credit, as well as increase the minimum wage. Once again, both were rejected by House, along party lines, by the House Republicans. And then finally, in their budget, with regards to spending for public education, for public schools rather, their House Republicans included less than 2% raise for traditional public schools, less than inflation, while continuing to divert more and more money to charter schools and voucher schools. Now, the good news, Senator Lannon, is that we are halfway through. So we will continue. House Democrats will continue to put forward real solutions to these problems, and we hope that House Republicans will use the second half of this session more wisely than they used the first. So I will turn it over to you, sir, and kind of reflect on how you all are doing over there.
Well, thank you, Leader Giaquinta. And, as you were mentioning, it's the first half. We sort of use that, think of sports metaphor terms. But my brilliant telecom director, Gabby, was suggesting that it's more like a Broadway production or something, Act 1, Act 2. And so I was thinking about that, and my thought would be, well, how would the audience feel at the end of Act 1? And my thinking would be they'd probably be headed to the exits or going to the box office to seek a refund. But no matter what the metaphor, the question here is, as we look forward to what's going to be accomplished here at the end of session, from this perspective, the question is Indiana moving forward, or are we just staying in place? And based upon your comments as to what's going on in the House, I have to also echo those in regards to the Senate. Other states are moving forward, whether it's these things you talked about as to redistricting reform, so that people really have faith in the integrity of the way we draw the maps here. Whether it's a minimum wage, we haven't raised the minimum wage now for over 9 years. Whether it's taking a look at the possibility of some reasonable medical marijuana reforms, and you've talked, of course, importantly about teacher pay. it looks like it could be another year where none of those issues are moved forward. And the problem with that is while many other states are adopting these type of measures, we stay the same, which means we're actually moving backwards because they're moving way ahead of us. So, and of course, from the Senate's point of view, we really, because you do have to deal with the budget and send it over to us, and because we didn't do anything ourselves on teacher pay, although our caucus member, Senator Eddie Melton, had a bill which would have ensured that teachers do receive a pay in this coming year. Probably the number one task that we had was to put together a meaningful hate crimes bill for the people of the state of Indiana. And the overwhelming consensus is that simply hasn't happened. No hate crimes bill whatsoever. And the most disappointing thing about that is there was a bipartisan effort in the Public Policy Committee to write a comprehensive, a complete, a inclusive hate crimes bill, which would really reflect the values of the people of the state of Indiana. It sailed out of public policy 9-1. And on the floor of the Indiana Senate, the majority party took that bipartisan effort and simply, it was just like, the playwright who says, I don't like this play whatsoever. They tear it up and they come out with 2 words and a comma. It just simply doesn't get the job done. So we've got a long ways to go. As you indicate, Leader Giaquina, there is time yet. I am hoping the governor's leadership will come to the forefront now, and that with that leadership, the pressure can be put on. I know that your caucus will put the pressure on to restore that list in the hate crimes bill. We think that that is important. And again, I challenge my good friends in the majority party. What are they scared of? Why do words, such as making sure that we don't have bias based upon race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, why do those words seem to scare everybody so much? There's nothing to be afraid here. Those truly reflect the values of the people of the state of Indiana. So there's time yet to do these things. I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful that there can be a consensus, there can be bipartisan work. Unfortunately, what we saw in the Indiana Senate, I'm just so disappointed because it seemed like bipartisanship was, was totally ignored in the process when it came to the hate crimes bill. Instead, it was one-sided. You saw the vote, all one-sided. I do commend the 7 members of the Republican Party, senators who joined us in voting against that amendment. But let's hope for better things to come in Act 2. Okay? All right. I guess we'll open it up to questions now, Leader.
You talked about the Senate failing to pass a meaningful hate crimes law, and then you talked about Governor Holcomb's leadership. Over here on the House side, Speaker Bosma has said from the very start that they're not interested in a bill that has that list of victim characteristics. So this is for either of you, but I'll start with Leader Giaquina, I suppose. What needs to happen to move a bill that you think is meaningful?
Well, as I think Senator Lannon indicated, we're going to have to see some support from the governor, a lot of support from the governor. I think business leaders across the state are going to have to get involved. And there's just going to have to be, like any lobbying effort, we'll have to talk with the chair of the committee where the bill is going to be assigned. Our House members are willing and ready to work with the chair of the committee where the bill is going to go. But this is going to need a concerted effort by all groups and folks around this state, starting with the governor and business leaders. They're the ones I think that have been most vocal so far, and we're going to really need their help. But it's going to take, and House Democrats are ready to work on this, and we're ready to move this bill forward and get it out of committee and get it to the floor. But we will be insisting on the list. We really like the way the bill came out of committee, Senator Alting's bill, and that's what we're going to work to see, and that's what we hope to see come out of committee and get to the floor so we can get a vote on it.
Yeah, I agree totally with the leader's comments in regards, but I do have to emphasize, I think the governor has to really step forward at this point in time. As far as I know, on the Senate side, I didn't really feel the pressure of his leadership over on that side, and certainly, at least 33 members of the majority in the Senate didn't feel it apparently, because they basically said, you know what, we don't need no stinking list. And I think that that's a shame. That list is an important statement as to where we are in the state of Indiana. And it's this idea that, well, you leave somebody out or you're favoring certain people. We all have a race, we all have a color. Most of us have a religion or a belief not to have a religion. We all have a sexual identity, and so I don't know who's left out in this whole process. If they are, let's talk about that. I don't, I'm not beyond discussing, what we need to do in that regards. I just fear that somehow that's an excuse for not really having a strong hate crimes in the state of Indiana, and I think the governor needs to come forward and make that statement just as well.
Do you think the hate crimes issue is going to turn into RFRA Part 2?
I'm not concerned about whether it turns into RFRA Part 2. I think it could possibly have that possibility. Who knows what's going to happen? But you know what? It's just like Spike Lee says, do the right thing. And let's do the right thing for the state of Indiana. What I'm concerned about is that people have this misperception of what's going on in Indiana. Here's the thing I said about this when they took that list out. I just can hear people throughout the country saying again, what's wrong with Indiana? Well, there's nothing wrong with Indiana. We just need to step up and have leaders in this state who will say, here is the policy when it comes to hate crimes in the state of Indiana. We don't tolerate it, and here's a list. We're not afraid of these words. We're going to put these words right in there. You agree with me, too,
I
Leader?
totally agree, and sometimes I think we sit here and we talk about words and lists and things like that, but hate crimes are on the rise in the state.
They are.
Tim.
They are.
And
hate organizations, too, by the way.
Yeah, and we saw something, a homicide last week. So this is a very serious issue, and as you indicated, and I agree, the governor needs to get involved, business leaders, the state chamber, others need to step up, and we need to get this done and get it done this session.
Absolutely.
Business leaders and the state chamber were involved on the Senate side, so do they just not do enough to get it done, or what can they do on the House side?
On the House side, Leader, what do you think?
I don't know what the involvement was on the Senate side, but I don't recall seeing a news conference. I don't recall seeing advertise those type of things that have been done in the past. And I will say this too, I have noticed, Senator Lannon, if there's something that business organizations have tried to get done in the past, they've been pretty successful. Yes. So if they put the time and effort into it, I think we can get it done.
I do want to point out something on the Senate side, and that is the fact that if I were a business leader, I would have been very pleased about what happened in the committee. And there may have been a little bit of a false sense of, oh, looks like we're going to get this done. And whatever happened in the Senate Republican caucus, I don't know, but there was a buzzsaw that came about, and all of a sudden, they ripped up that great bill that was written in public policy. And that took me by surprise to a degree, and it may have taken a lot of the business leaders. So, they're going to have to be more cautious, I think, and more bold on this side here in terms of where this bill goes.
On teacher pay, House Republicans so far have balked at the idea of mandates because they want to preserve local control on making those salary decisions and negotiating those contracts. So how do you enact meaningful teacher pay increases without infringing on local control?
I don't know the exact answer to that. I would say, however, that there is a mechanism that I think by which the monies coming from the state, first of all, I think we have to make sure that we do provide the resources there so that when you look at the various school districts, it is, as a practical matter, something that can work its way into teacher pay increases. And I think that might have been one of the problems with the House bill, was that when you looked at district to district, there wasn't any language in there to make sure that the job could get done in each district. So we're going to have to look at that. I have a lot of faith in the Appropriations Committee, and we've got some very creative people there that I think will find a way to craft a language to make sure that money does go for what it should. We're falling behind other states. We know that. And so, however we get it done, it's something that if there's a will, there's a way to do it, and I'm pretty sure that we can get that.
Yeah, it's really not that complicated. It really isn't. We had 5% in each year in the biennium, specifically earmarked for
Yeah.
teacher pay. It's just not that complicated. It starts with us, Senator Lannon. We're the ones that control the money, the budgets, and look, they're leaving the profession here in
Right.
the state. They're going to other
Serious.
states because of pay and other things as well. But again, we put out a couple proposals that were rejected. It's not that complicated, and we can get it done.
Does the basic House approach work in your view, the idea of directing a certain percentage to the classroom with some tweaks to the wording, or does that need to be torn up and start over?
You know, and I know
Mm-hmm.
that the House, I think it's 1003 where they put that language. Is that correct, Leader? I think that's the House
Yeah,
bill.
the-
But my gut reaction to that was it was sort of blaming the victim for their problems. You know, we've taken a lot of action as a state to divert money from public schools, made it tougher and tougher for them to balance their books and whatever. And now we're going to say, well, but it's your fault for not spending the money in the correct way. And I have no problem with accountability. There certainly should be accountability as to how that money is spent. But I'm heartened to hear what Leader Giaquina said here about, there was a mechanism by which to make sure that money gets into teacher pay, and so that's going to be our emphasis as we look at the budget here in the second half, the second act.
Leader Giaquina, where are the House Democrats on the gaming legislation?
Which
The one that's going to be approved in the Senate.
are you, with regards to the casino licenses?
Casino
and things?
move, the
Right.
sports wagering.
Yeah, well, we haven't in the past taken a caucus position on gaming, because I know this is particularly for folks in the Lake County area, hit pretty close to home. But it certainly in the past has never been a caucus position on any type of gaming issue, and I suspect that'll remain the same.
Do you think it's appropriate to have the sports wagering in that bill? It seems to have not actually gotten much discussion because everyone's talking about moving the licenses and the boats. And so how do you feel about the sports wagering part of that being kind of lumped in? Both of you on that.
I was a little surprised they weren't separated out too, but you know how gaming is. It all sorts tends to get into one giant. I always compare it to like a Swiss clock. You move one part of it, and everything else seems to want to follow. So, the sports betting, they're talking about that occurring. Having a nexus with the existing betting facilities. So, I guess in some ways it makes sense because in the end, I found in the past around here, it is it does take sort of a comprehensive effort to try to, as best as possible, get everybody satisfied, and I think that's what was the approach with the gaming bill in the Senate, and I know the House will take a look at that and do what they think.
Probably would have been
That's
nice
right.
to separate it out. I mean, we've had summer study meetings on sports wagering, things like that, so it probably would have been nice to have it separated out, but we'll see what happens over here.
Question for both of you. I know the medical marijuana bills are pretty much dead, and it's a priority for Senate Democrats. Where do you both stand, and what are your hopes for medical marijuana looking forward at the halfway point?
Well, there again, I think that's probably something else where another year is going to go by where we probably don't do too much on that, which is unfortunate because when you look at the supporters of medical marijuana, they're not a bunch of wackos. We have veterans groups that are very much concerned about this. We as a state, we're looking at alternative medicine approaches so that everybody doesn't end up on opiates. And if there's some benefit to that, if other states have taken reasonable marijuana reform, we ought to really take a look at that. So it's pretty it's a little bit disappointing, I think, because it just sort of seems again that we're so conservative on some of these issues that we are even scared to really take a look at what are the facts involved in all this. And I think that's all that I know Senate Democrats are saying is let's just look at the facts and consider whether or not there is a professional, medically sound reason why we ought to look at that type of reform.
Same for the House.
We have not, I know there's been interest on both sides,
Yeah.
Republicans and Democrats over here. We haven't had a committee discussion. It would be I think, interesting to hear some of the pros and cons of medical marijuana. It's something that
Yeah.
we have not discussed much, really, frankly, in our caucus because it hasn't come up. And we haven't had really too many legislators on our side push the issue, but I know there is some interest. And it would, that's the reason why we have these committee hearings to kind of flush
Yeah.
these things out and get the facts. And
I do want to follow up on one thing, which is your question raises, which is a little bit of a disappointment in terms of the lack of bipartisanship on some of these important issues. Whether it's medical marijuana reform, the members on both sides have advocated that. Redistricting reform, we have bills on both sides of that issue. So we need to, I think, the majority party wants to say that we don't have gerrymandering in the state of Indiana, but when we look at issues, important issues like that, where there seems to be an opportunity for bipartisan movement ahead, but we just simply can't get it done, you do wonder about the effect of these overwhelming numbers that we have here in the State House, and is it holding us back as a state on some of these important issues?
Representative Giaquino, why do you think House Republicans were so adamant against the cigarette tax increase?
I'm guessing they are a little weary of tax increases in general. We had recently the gas tax increase. I believe there's been probably a number of fees that have increased over the last couple of years. Probably just, frankly, a little weary of more tax increases. It would be a guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
sure, but-
that. I mean, we do have to remember that gasoline tax increase was one of the largest tax increases in history, which the Republican Party advocated for. On the other hand, I don't know how many years it's been since we raised the cigarette tax. It's been a long
about
time.
12 years.
And we directly know the harm, the medical harm, the health harm that we have to the people of the state of Indiana. In my opinion, it's a no-brainer, and that money could be used for health prevention, or cigarette smoking prevention. It could be used to maybe help fund the increase in the pay for teachers. But I'm just saying that to me, there's another issue
we
where
had
we're not moving forward.
and we did have an amendment to the budget for the tax increase, but we're ruled out of order. I believe there's a bill pending. Someone had filed a bill.
Yeah, you have that rule, don't you?
Yeah, we do have that rule. So they use it a lot.
Why do you think there was no discussion on, or not much discussion or action on pre-K program? It seems to be total status quo from the governor.
That is one I am, the results, the positive results of the pre-K pilot program have been great.
Oh, absolutely.
And you talk to the advocates of this program and how important it is to get these small children at such a young age,
that early
when their
learning.
brain is
Yeah.
developing and all those sorts of things. And I'm sure once again, as you mentioned earlier, we are one of probably a few states in this country that does not have pre-K statewide, and it's just it's really mind-boggling really as to why we can't do it, because we've had this pilot program now for 5 or 6 years, and it's little by little that we expand this, and it's just taking too long, particularly when the results have been so good.
Yeah. So there's another thing, another year where we apparently don't move forward in the state of Indiana. So it's puzzling. It's hard to understand exactly. I do want to congratulate the House Democrats, and I know Representative Delaney was able to get an amendment into the budget which would require coverage for pre-existing conditions, health conditions under certain circumstances. And I have a bill over at the Senate that would have done that and required it statewide for any health care insurer, but it didn't get a hearing over there. So congratulations.
You think they'll keep that in?
Well, I sure hope they should, of course, and because people believe in those protections there. We have them now by virtue of the Affordable Care Act, and we should make sure that does remain in the state of Indiana.
I want to go back to the cigarette tax for just a second. The House did pass the e-liquids tax. That means you've got a vehicle waiting for you. Is there any more appetite in the Senate for that?
There will be some appetite, because I have an appetite for that. I think you bring up the e-liquids. I'm very concerned about e-cigarettes and youth. utilizing e-cigarettes, and we've seen that, sort of an explosion that apparently it's not legal for them to even have it, I believe, but something's going on there, and we really need to take a look at that whole issue. So, but to answer your question, Eric, yes, I think there's a mechanism there, and there'll be some appetite for renewing that
26
idea.
votes worth.
Yes. I can't really quantify the number of votes, but if people are thinking in terms of what's in the best interest of the health of our state, you'll have 26 at least.
Have you thanked Senator Freeman for his amendment on bias crimes as he suggested?
I didn't know he was asking for my
He said it
thanks.
on the floor.
Oh yes, I must have missed that. I missed some of his comments, but no, I mean, I guess I would say everyone's free to offer an amendment. It's completely disappointing to me. What's also disappointing to me is that we didn't have meaningful debate over that on the floor of the Indiana Senate. It's not right that something that important was decided behind closed doors, and but we'll continue. We'll continue that fight, and hopefully the public will weigh in. I think the public's fully behind, the language that was in there, Leader, and I hope that you're able to get some substantial progress to restore that back here in the House.
There's always a certain amount of